Hello and welcome to Unsourced Wall. My name is Elvis, and as always, I'm your host. Okay, so this is going to be kind of a long one. We have a bunch of things to get through. It's going to be kind of tough to pack it all in, but let's try and do the best of it. First off, we have some news that went through a lot of twists and turns in just a short amount of time, and that news is that apparently Joker is getting a sequel and some spin-offs. Or that it's not getting a sequel, but maybe a spin-off. Or no sequels and no spin-offs. It's kind of a mess depending on what news sources first caught your eye. There seemed to be a lot of double talk regarding all of this immediately after the first articles started to pop up. Honestly, I feel like something is given since it became one of the most profitable and well-received movies of the year. It will get a follow-up of some kind, but the powers that be definitely want to play the cards close to their chest for now. Either way, be it a sequel or some new origin spin-offs, I think the best ideas are a Luthor companion film, which a lot of people are vying for, or grounded rogues heist movies. Those are the no-brainers. We also have the announcement from The Rock that the Black Adam movie is slated to come out in December of 2021, which is kind of sooner than I think anyone expected because he's been a busy guy, and apparently the Justice Society of America will be playing a huge part of the film, which gives credence to certain script leaks from a few months back that were just terrible, like completely god-awful. So I'm setting my expectations low. I hope The Rock and the creative team can deliver a strong, hard-hitting movie that sets us up for Shazam 2 and 3, but it's definitely worrisome, especially if you give any kind of merit to the idea that The Rock doesn't want to play a villain and what that means for Black Adam's origin story as a whole. So fingers crossed. Moving ahead onto TV news, there's really only one thing, which again is pretty worrying, and that is that Stargirl will be simulcast on the CW one day after the DC Universe app premiere. And there are folks who have said that just because the CW has picked up the show doesn't mean it's going to be CW style garbage. But after the rumors about how Titan season 1 was only saved because executives at WB liked that it was CW-esque and that Swamp Thing was cancelled precisely because it wasn't CW, and Doom Patrol only got a bailout because it was a cult hit and HBO was like, we could use that, makes it seem like Stargirl fit the niche enough for the CW to make that a worthwhile exchange, and that is just really, really uneasy. I hope the show is still good, but it frames everything we've heard about the series so far in terms of the plot, in terms of the setting and the characters, into a wholly different light, because it could be something fun, but it's also the kind of thing where it could just completely sink into the most CW-esque indulgences and terrible melodramatic writing. And well, fingers crossed for them. I hope it turns out to blow away my expectations, but they are kind of 6 feet under right now. With the CW, you have to be prepared for the worst. Lastly, in comic news, we have the untimely and unfortunate passing of artist Tom Lyle at the age of 66, who remains an iconic fixture in the hearts and minds of many comic fans for his works on character designs and ongoing series and even miniseries, some notable ones being DC Starman series and a whole slew of Spider-Man stories and characters. There's been so much outpouring of love and admiration from his colleagues, friends, and fans, and I'm glad his legacy will continue to live on, and I hope that he rests in peace and that his loved ones find some solace in these really sorrowful times. I really do. So rest in peace, Mr. Lyle. You will be missed. Next up, we can head on into what I read this week. First off is Dial H for Hero number 9. And every time I think I might have some doubts about whether this series will have the longevity and timelessness that I hope for, they are resoundingly dashed every time I open a new issue because they just completely outstrip themselves again and again. And this one is no exception. It brings back the stakes, it brings back the action, and it ups the danger in a way that feels like a catch-up for maybe waffling around for the past 3 issues, but almost seamlessly manages to make it fit. It's definitely kind of weird how the two halves of this series, the slower, more intimate slice of life tones, and the high-concept, insane, and overflowingly fun superhero chaos can be so great apart, but the intermingling can be kinda jagged. This issue has been doing it the best, though, at bringing them together, and it even brings back some of the loose threads from the first season and giving it this needed kick in the pants to start feeling like an actually all-encompassing 12-issue story. Now it feels like things are actually connected, that it has proper momentum and payoff. Miguel and Summer are still incredibly enjoyable, and Humphries and Quinones are continuing to kill it. Quinones does things in this issue that are just beyond what a regular artist should be able to do. Like a Chris Ware's homage, it's amazing, it's incredible, it's unthinkable, and I love it. He just ups the ante for himself time and again. What a madman. If this issue is the bridge into the climax issues, then it's well crafted on a story level, on a character level, and just well on every single creative level that is really necessary here. So kudos. I'm excited to see where this goes. 2 thumbs up. Next up, we have Immortal Hulk number 27. This is an issue where I like the idea more than the execution. because the execution kind of feels too standard for the more complex and intricate concepts it's playing with. Like, you have the villain of the issue, the Minotaur here, going off about how their company's reach and how their power has allowed them to really control not only the public's perception of society, but also of global issues and interpersonal individualism, that they've pretty much shaped reality due to their connections, data mining, and control over informational infrastructure. All pretty interesting ideas to delve into, and it's the brunt of Bruce's whole manifesto from the last issue. But the plan to get rid of all this, that is shown in really long detail, is just to smash the servers. Like, don't get me wrong, I love it when the Hulk smashes, but it feels really underwhelming given the higher, more ideological stakes that are being played with here, especially since it's a given that Hulk will smash, and all he's doing in this issue is fighting random henchmen. So it feels very lackluster and uninteresting, and so much space is kind of wasted on it. Honestly, I think they could have skipped over the fight entirely and maybe instead contrast the Minotaur's speech with depictions of how destroying the server farms has started to change society and people's interactions with the world around them. Like, that would have been cool and a lot more engaging and introspective than just another fight. The thematic meat would have been there, and it's still here, but it's overplayed and it lessens the impact a lot. The series is aiming for very lofty ideals, and it should go for that wholeheartedly, and this just doesn't feel like it's doing that. It's a decent issue with some great and thoughtful moments, but it's really nothing more than that at the end of the day. The solicits for the next couple issues make me hopeful for where this is going to go next, but, fingers crossed. Overall, one thumb up, one thumb middle. Moving ahead, we have Middleman number 2, and I know that this series is still pretty controversial among Middleman fans right now, and I don't know whether or not this new issue is going to be able to bring anyone back into the fold or convince them to stick around to see where this is going. But what I can say is that at the very least, this issue makes certain thematic and dramatic elements a lot more clear and honestly a lot more engaging than I was expecting, right out of the gate, to the point where I felt like this would have been a better first issue than what we actually got, because it allows for both the standard Middleman shenanigans to take the forefront and for the darker and harsher intimations to stick out without feeling so rushed and rather in your face. As it stands though, I do think that it works as a really great follow-up anyway, and in a way that makes distinctly clear why I like this series over what Tom King did to Mr. Miracle, despite a lot of the shared conceptual similarities. And that's the contrast and juxtaposition of tone, as in Middleman actually does that. It actually makes the effort to show the conflict between the regular and expected tone of the series against what we, the reader, now know and how to get drama from that. It's on a pretty standard for the Dio blunt tone, but I'm kind of reading this for the blunt tone. I think that when the Dio hits a groove, it can be second to none in terms of campy, frivolous, goofy antics. And that's what it brushes against in this issue, milling through goofy jokes, psych eggs, and puns with the Middleman, only to be bum rushed by the actual threat that is Nth and the tragic secret we know Will Magnus is keeping. It makes for an issue that can come across tonally jumbled, but I feel that's more an uneasy array of emotions because the jarring nature of it all is the point. I'm actually kind of invested now, and I hope that it continues as the series moves along. It's setting up obvious but impactful parallels between Will and Nth that I can't wait to see play out. And Gold's road to self-realization is only just beginning, so I can't wait for that. I really can't. I'm cautiously excited. Overall, one thumb up, one thumb middle. And now we can move on to what I watched this week. We have Watchmen episode 5, A Little Fear of Lightning, and this has to be the best episode of the series so far. And it's not even because it's that impressive, which I mean, it is, but that's not really a key factor in why it was even a good episode in the first place. It's just that finally I can put into words what the rest of the show has been missing, and that is a story, an actual narrative you can follow through to the end that you can be immersed in because it's a journey that's enveloping and has characters you're experiencing things with through their perspective. The rest of the show, barring the Lori episode, just barely, is just too preoccupied with a mystery, with both keeping things away from the audience in terms of the narrative, but also in terms of the actual character we're supposed to be following as well. Each episode just continues to pull away at questions, instead of actually allowing us to really engage with the world. How can we when it's just this vague and unfocused world building and overemphasized focus on the overarching story with no real rhyme or reason for why we should even be interested in the first place? This episode, however, gets to the heart of itself. Like Laurie's episode, it's a given as a character piece from the get-go, but unlike Laurie's, it makes the case for this as a sequel to Watchmen. It gives so much more breadth and atmosphere to the world of this series than anything else before it, making it feel like this extension and follow-through on certain events and trends from the comic. And we are experiencing this side of the world no holds barred, completely in tune with the character we are following, and allow him to emotionally engage and immerse on a level that was kind of barred before this. It's just easier to invest when you have a good foothold, or some foothold into what's going on. I mean, Looking Glass, played by Tim Blake Nelson, is still in the dark about things, is still investigating a mystery, but it's done in such a way where all the cards he's holding are all the cards that we have too. And he's actually making strides that we can, take some vicarious thrill in actually solving the things around him. Not just question after question, and then some scenes where we're shown that there are going to be even more questions, or that we're asking the wrong questions, thus being even more vague and adding layer and layer upon vagueness. I mean, that just saps all interest and energy out of the story. Like, how can you even care after so many scenes and sequences like that? This episode puts some of that energy back in. It gives it that anima that I was talking about last week. It gives it some force, some joie de vivre. It's not perfect. It's still got some cornball stuff in it, but it's got an emotional connection to the character, to the story, to the world that I wish the rest of the series had more of. Looking Glass is a character that we finally understand a little bit of, that we understand enough of a core about to make us want to follow him on this journey, and I'm just not getting that from Sister Night at all. If this is the high point, then this is going to be the high point, and that's a shame. Hope these last 5 episodes capture some of what made this work. Overall, 2 thumbs up. And lastly, we can head on to listener questions. We have one question this week from the ever-esteemed Not on Twitter, and their question is, what are my thoughts on the recent canceled Loki series? I just want to say I'm sorry because I know there was a second part to this question with regards to Gillet and Ewing's Loki stuff, but I didn't even touch the latter, and the former is kind of a distant memory after years now. But the canceled series, I just went through it, it's fresh in my mind, and well, I have to say my thoughts on it are that it was pretty decent. It's light, it's enjoyable, it's easygoing. It didn't have too much of its own head up its ass, and it kind of knew how to tell some very succinct and well-crafted gags and punchlines. It was goofy, it was, well, a lot of very low-hanging fruit, but it did it well enough. It did it in a kind of Christopher Hastings kind of way, except a little bit less than that, but it was enough to be just a simple standard book, and that's really all you need to be sometimes. And I think this is a series where I'm glad they didn't go too overwrought and be like, oh, this is Loki, you like Loki, let's try to make Loki the best, most cool character. But no, it's a very standard, very staunch kind of book, and I thought that it really fit that peg for what it was. Like, it felt like the kind of book that would go on for maybe 20 to 30 issues, and at the end of it feel like it told a nicely paced stories that knew what it wanted to do. Unfortunately, it was cut down in issue 5, and we'll probably never get to see what they had in mind. It wasn't anything all-engrossing or special, but it was vaguely intriguing and entertaining, just enough for an ongoing to coast for a little while. It's also kind of a shame, and honestly kind of saddening, that the final letter page had the writer talk about headcanoning your own ending, which is the biggest admission of defeat I've ever heard from a writer, at least in a while, but I enjoyed it. And I just want to bring this up because I saw your opinion on the Cord Knot, where you thought issue 5 was one of the better issues, and I have to say I disagree. I thought that was just too much. It was kind of overwrought. It just felt like the kind of book that I was worried this would be, but the last couple of pages I think saved it. I think, gave it a little bit more of a well-rounded tone at the end. But overall, that issue was the one I felt like if the rest of the issues had been more like this issue, I would be less surprised that it was canceled. But the previous issues I thought had, very, very simple aims and goals, and it hit all of them. So, you know what? I'm gonna miss it. I really am. It was fun stuff, and I don't regret reading it. Hope someone else picks up the threads that it set down. Anyway, thank you for that question, Not. I know that we disagreed a little bit, but I'm so glad that you put this on my radar, because I had a lot of fun reading it, and your question was a lot of fun to just even think about. So thank you for that question. It was pretty enjoyable. And I just want to say thank you to everyone out there who's ever sent in a question, comment, or topic to the show. It means so much to me. I am so grateful for that, and I'm just really humbled. You have such great questions, so I really appreciate all of you so much. So thank you so much. And if anyone else out there has their own questions, comments, or topics they want to hear discussed on the show, you can always find me on Twitter at THE_SNICKMAN. And I just want to give a shout out to the cover artist for the show at DOTEMCEE. Please check them out. They're an amazing artist. Give them all the traction they deserve because they are simply magnificent. And again, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a great week and see you again next time. Have a happy Thanksgiving.